Welcome back, everybody, to Watcher of All Things. My name is Kiki, and this is my podcast where I talk movies, TV shows, and all things entertainment. And today, it's episode 43. We are reviewing Anora. A lot of people's predictions for Best Picture, possibly. Everyone has been raving about it. I saw it last night. I know it's been a rough week for a lot of people. Very depressing. I was down for a little while. We all know what I'm talking about. And I think this is going to be a very fun episode where we can just kind of get into the nuts and bolts of Anora. We also got some news to talk about. I've been traveling for work most of the week. I was in Southern Ontario in the Niagara region. A very eventful week. I stayed up one night while traveling to watch a certain election, which I'll get into a little bit later. I'm not really going to dwell on it or talk about it because I feel like everything has been said online, and I kind of want this to be a little bit of an escape from all that. Let's have some fun. So before we get into our news section, of course, remember there are timestamps below, whether you're on the streaming platforms or on YouTube. If you have only seen the trailer for Anora, you're very safe in the non-spoilers. Again, I talk very general, and in the spoilers, I really try to work out how I felt about this movie and how I understand it. We got some more Netflix news, we got some delays, we have some future of films according to One Star, and we have a new trilogy for a highly milked franchise. But let's get into the news. All right, well, our Netflix discussion continues because Daniel Craig, who's currently doing press for his Luca Guadagnino film Queer, he was talking about Knives Out 3, talking about Netflix, that he wants Netflix to put Knives Out 3 in theaters for more than just 1 week. Hopefully they will push it out a bit. And when Variety asked him, do you think Knives Out 3 deserves a more robust theatrical rollout, he said, you know I do. Hopefully Netflix will push it out a bit and people will get to see it. The people I speak to, the fans I suppose, all they want to do is take their families and go see it at the cinemas. That's all they want to do. Hopefully we can give them that experience. So not a crazy quote, but I think it really does speak to the Knives Out franchise. To me, does have a very good following. Like that first Knives Out film, I think was super popular, and even Glass Onion, which I thought wasn't as good as the first one, but I still did enjoy. I think it's a little bit too restricted to its time, where I think Knives Out is like a little more, I don't know, timeless. I've already talked about this before in previous episodes, but yeah, I appreciate what Craig is saying because Knives Out is definitely a movie I would watch with my family. It's a very fun, funny murder mystery. I love the detective aspect. My mom, she's a huge British crime detective. So you got Miss Marple, all the Agatha Christie stuff, Poirot. I grew up with that stuff in my house. I'm not maybe the world's biggest Agatha Christie. I don't watch them. It's not like I hate them or anything, but I grew up with that in my house. I have always had Miss Marple, Poirot, all these British crime TVs. BritBox is the invention of the wheel for my family, I think. I'm actually so impressed with my mom's dedication to British crime dramas, which are popular for many people. And I do love, crime stuff. I love Only Murders in the Building. That's a crime thing. Movies like Zodiac, where there's a crime and a mystery we're trying to solve. But for me, and I don't know, my generation, I guess, or people my age, I think Knives Out was a movie that really spoke to a lot of us. We had our stars on the screen that we all love. And Ana de Armas, I think is so good in those movies. Chris Evans, so good in Knives Out. Michael Shannon, it's just everyone. Toni Collette, everyone in Knives Out is amazing. Even in Knives Out 2, Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery, whatever it's called, I still think the cast is very good in that movie. It's just that I think the story isn't as great, but I think I really love the star-studded casts in Knives Out, and I would totally understand that Glass Onion would have made $600 million, like we talked about last week or the week before, easily. And I would totally believe that because I remember when the first Knives Out movie came out, it was really everywhere. And didn't Rian Johnson, I think, did he win an Oscar, right, for his screenplay? I think didn't he win one? I can't remember, but Knives Out, a brilliant movie. Okay, next I want to talk about Tom Hanks is doing press for Here right now, of course. If you missed last week's episode, Here, very interesting movie. Even if you haven't seen it, I think my conversation about it, I think there is a lot of things that kind of speak to a more general trends or whatever in the film industry as well, involving AI, kind of gimmicky movies like Robert Zemeckis does a lot of the time. I failed to mention last week, Robert Zemeckis did the Back to the Future movies. I love Back to the Future. That is one of my favorite movies. That first, I mean, there's some creepy parts in it, but I absolutely love Back to the Future, and that's one of the movies for me. I completely forgot. I got so caught up in the Forrest Gumpness because I love Forrest Gump. But anyways, Tom Hanks was, of course, they ask every big star, what do you think of superhero movies? I think a lot of people kind of jumped on his throat, but I don't think he's trying to put down superhero movies. So let me read you the quote. So he said he believes that we've had 20 years of these movies and that many audiences have moved on. He said, I think there was a period of time, and I felt that way too, where we would see these fantastic movies, either DC or MCU, in order to see these better versions of ourselves. God, I feel like an X-Man sometimes. I'm as confused as Spider-Man. I'm as angry as Batman is, and I love my country as much as Captain America. I would like to emulate all those guys. I think we've been down that road and had probably 20 years, 15 years to explore that kind of thing. And now I think we're in an evolutionary place of, and the story is what? And the theme is what? And the point of the movie is what? He continued that, and that's a good challenge for any filmmaker. It might just not land in the roadhouse for the industry. The industry often says, well, this works and it will work again. The audience is far ahead of it. They see the familiar and say, I've seen that already. What's next? It's not just eye-popping stuff. It's what's the story? Tell me about myself. We're in new territory. And I don't think he's trying to say enough with the superhero movies. I think the way I interpret that, and I actually really do agree with this, I think a lot of superhero movies recently have just relied on CGI fest. We're just going to have a huge big battle, but we're not going to have an actual complicated story that's going to pull you in and talk about things and actually tell you a heartwarming story. And that's why I really agree with what James Gunn said, I think last year when he talked about superhero fatigue. I think he said something along the lines of, people aren't tired of superhero movies, they're tired of bad stories in superhero movies. And exactly like Tom Hanks said there, we resonate and we see ourselves in all of these heroes, you know, like Superman, you know, a guy that wants to do the right thing in a world that he thinks is full of evil or is losing hope. He wants to be a beacon of hope. Or Batman, that he stands for, you know, justice. And I think Tom Hanks is totally right. And I think what he's talking about in those last 20 to 15 years is, like the eye-popping comment specifically is what I'm thinking of. He's talking about that you can't just rely on amazing CGI and spectacle. There needs to be, you know, there needs to be a heart to the story. And I think that's why, even I'm going to go back to Dune Part 2 over a lot of superhero movies. Dune Part 2 is a sci-fi fantasy, of course, but I think it's not just amazing visuals and amazing visual storytelling, but there is heartbreak, there's tragedy, there's actual discussions about leaders and, you know, false prophets and what we do in a world where destiny is chosen for us, where there's no free will. You know, that's a movie that's actually having conversations. Or even Guardians of the Galaxy 3, that's one of the best superhero movies of probably the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years easily. I love Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and that's because James Gunn, he knows how to hide a story inside of spectacle. He knows how to have emotion, how to write about ourselves, like especially when he talks about, you know, Rocket Raccoon is himself. I totally get why people would at first dismiss Tom Hanks' comments, because I'm also a little tired of every celebrity and every press junket. You just have to ask every big celebrity, oh, what do you think of these Marvel movies? What do you think of that? It's like, these are clearly traps that they're setting in the media for people to just get yelled at online. But I think Tom Hanks has hit it on the head. Like spectacle and the eye-popping CGI, the big beam of light in the sky, or the big, you know, superheroes just smashing superhero figures together on screen. That's not enough. You need a story that's going to talk to people and comfort them, or, you know, give them peace and say it's okay to be angry or whatever. And that's why, especially, I'm going to talk about it, I guess, just minorly, but after the election this week, of course, there's tons of people that are very happy that Donald Trump won. Of course, you know, he got whatever, how many millions of votes, but a lot of the world is very sad and feels it's kind of hopeless. And that's why I think summer 2025, Superman is coming at the perfect time, because Superman is a guy that many people resonate with, because he's someone that wants to have hope in a world that is continually losing hope and giving into, you know, false idols and evil and division and hatred. So totally get what Tom Hanks is saying, and I agree as well with James Gunn that there isn't superhero fatigue. There's a run of superhero movies that are forgetting about the story, and I think Marvel is largely responsible for that. They are giving us superhero movies simply to show those characters on screen without having an actual story to tell, and that's why I love the direction and the method of DC Studios so far. They're not greenlighting anything until the script is ready. Until the story's ready, we're not filming. We're not rolling. Prep. And I think James Gunn is the perfect guy to spearhead that with Peter Safran. This week, there's been tons of stuff behind the scenes of the drama with Robert Pattinson and Zendaya filming, but as happy as that made a lot of Robert Pattinson and Zendaya fans, Mickey 17 has now been delayed to April 18th, 2025, a day before my birthday, actually. So kind of a great birthday gift for me that I'm going to have a new Robert Pattinson film to watch on Easter weekend on my birthday. But Mickey 17 has been delayed to April 18th, 2025. It was supposed to come out, I think, January 17th of 2025. But so Warner Brothers has moved the Robert Pattinson-led sci-fi film to April 18th, 2025, 3 months after the previous release date of January 31st, 2025, and almost a year after its original theatrical scheduling of March 29th, 2024. World of Real says, still, this is good news for Bong's film as it now moves away from the January dumping grounds. The new date is because the Michael Jackson film is just recently moved to an October rollout, so Warner Brothers is looking for something to put in April, and now the film is going to secure a lot more IMAX screens and large format screens than it would have in January. So I was excited to see it in January, but I think January is where a lot of movies go to die. So maybe a spring release will be good. It might be more of a financial success because people can see it in IMAX. It'll be available in more big screen formats that might draw people to the theater. I don't know, but I'm still excited for it. I know 3 months seems like a long time. It's not. I've been alive for 24 years and there's been plenty of 3 months in there. You'd be surprised how fast 3 months goes by, but I'm still excited for it. I know it's been a year now that it's been delayed, and it's going on, almost a full year that it's been delayed since its original date, and we didn't have a trailer forever. But at the end of the day, after a year of delays, 3 months is really not that much. So let's keep our chin up, kids. Okay, final piece of news, because looking at my notes for Anora, I actually have so much to say and a lot that I kind of want to work through. So let's finish on a mixed note for me. Deadline is reporting that Star Wars trilogy deal. Lucasfilm taps Simon Kinberg to write and produce. So episodes 10 to 12 are going to be written and produced by Simon Kinberg. I think he's writing all 3 films, but if you don't know who Simon Kinberg is, he's been a massive figure in the X-Men movies, in the Logan film, Deadpool film. I have mixed feelings. I think the fact that he was involved in Logan is great, but a lot of his movies have stunk up the joint for me. Most of his X-Men movies, yikes. Like, we're talking, Dark Phoenix, and I'm just not, I don't know, I have very mixed feelings on this, but also there's very little details coming out about the new trilogy. I know just last week or the week before, Stephen Knight, the Peaky Blinders guy, right? He was supposed to do the Rey film. I believe he has walked away and he is no longer involved in the project. So I wonder, is the Rey film going to be the first of the trilogy, and Simon Kinberg is now, is he on board to kick off the trilogy and he's going to work alongside Daisy Ridley and have her lead the new trilogy? I'm not sure. Are we going to get Oscar Isaac back? Are we going to get Finn back? What's the deal with the new trilogy? But I say I have mixed feelings because I think a break from Star Wars is needed. I think the MCU and Star Wars both need maybe 2 years off of any TV or any movies. There's too much. People are kind of, except Andor. Sorry, let me preface that by saying except Andor. Give us Andor immediately. I need that now. But otherwise, I think Disney is relentlessly milking a lot of its franchises, Star Wars and Marvel specifically. The public is kind of getting tired of it, and maybe that's an opportune time for DC to step in, offer something else. Say you don't have to watch anything else. You can just enjoy this one movie. The continuity is going to be very loose. We're going to reference other things, but do people want another Star Wars trilogy? I don't know. And then the other side of me is saying that maybe a Star Wars film would be better, because I think a lot of the people are skipping out on Star Wars television and they're kind of done with the TV part of Star Wars after feeling burned by the last season of The Mandalorian. The Acolyte, a lot of people felt burnt by that, myself included. Like, I think it had some promising points and some interesting parts, but on the whole was just straight up kind of boring. I think Andor is really the only thing that's like a shining beacon in all of the Star Wars stuff of the last few years, apart from the season 1 of The Mandalorian, I would say, when it was still like Greg Fraser and really looked high quality and was like, wow, this is something completely different. This is a whole new direction for Star Wars. And then immediately season 2, I was like, this is still good, but we're kind of leaning now into smashing our superhero figures or our little figures together. So I think it's time to get into Anora. As I said, timestamps below. If you only want to hear the non-spoiler section, you can skip the spoiler section after. There's lots to digest. I saw this last night, but let's get into it. Anora. Anora is a 2024 comedy romance coming in at 2 hours and 19 minutes. Currently has 97% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 92% audience score, 8.2 on IMDb, has a 4.2 rating on Letterboxd with the average user giving it, I think the 4 stars is like the most common. What do you call that? The median? Or the mode? The mode, like the most, damn, I haven't done math. That was embarrassing. But yeah, the mode, I think most people are giving it 4 stars with just 4.5 and 5 just coming in after that. Very highly rated. a very highly anticipated film, I will say. The film is, of course, directed by Sean Baker. It's also produced and written, edited, casted partially by Sean Baker, who did The Florida Project, film that a lot of people loved with Willem Dafoe in it. There's also a film called Red Rocket that he did, and maybe, I think Tangerine is a Sean Baker film as well. Google's in a nutshell is electrifying, passionate, frantic. Its release was apparently October 25th, but that is absolute BS. In most of Canada, this was largely unavailable. In fact, in most of the world, it was largely unavailable. It was playing in select cities from like October 15th onward. Like, how many episodes now have I said, next week, Anora, and then it's not out the next week? It's probably been 4 or 3 episodes, something like that. But distributed by Neon with a budget of $6 million, cinematography by Drew Daniels, 91% on Metacritic as well. I didn't mention that. The synopsis is as follows. Anora, a young sex worker from Brooklyn, gets her chance at a Cinderella story when she meets and impulsively marries the son of an oligarch. Once the news reaches Russia, her fairy tale is threatened as the parents set out for New York to get the marriage annulled. The film stars Mikey Madison as Annie/Anora, Mark Eidelstein as Ivan, Karen Karagulian as Toros, Yura Borisov as Igor, Vacha Tovmazian as Garnik, Lindsay Normington as Diamond, Daria Eka Masova as Galina Zarkov, and Alexei Serebrinkov as Nikolai Zarkov, Anton Bitter as Tom, Ivy Walk as Crystal, Emily Wider as Nikki, Luna Sophia Miranda as Lulu. So a very good cast in this. Okay, Anora. So, a star-studded cast, an established director. Look, I have been, like I said, anticipating this film since that very first trailer, since it won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. Is that what it is? Like the best film at Cannes. Everybody I follow online has been raving about it. So, to my own detriment, I think, my expectations were so high for this film. And maybe having not seen a Sean Baker film before seeing it, I wasn't sure what I was getting into. What's his storytelling like? What should I be like what's his delivery method? So I had very high expectations, but not really knowing what to expect from the story, what's going to be the tone. And I think with all that being said, I walked out of the film a little bit underwhelmed at first. And before anybody jumps down my throat, I still really enjoyed this movie. And upon further reflection, I think it's growing on me. I don't think it's perfect, or I didn't enjoy the delivery method sometimes, but I liked it a lot. And we're going to work through some of my feelings in this episode because I do have a ton to say about this. So it reminded me a lot of Past Lives, and walking out, I felt a little bit underwhelmed and it didn't quite reach those heights, but I think I need a second viewing of this for sure. So keep in mind, obviously I'm sticking to a lot of general things and non-spoilers, but in spoilers, I'm going to really try and work through my specific understanding of the story and the dynamics and our characters. So of course, let's begin with the performances. Mikey Madison as Annie/Anora, but she goes by Annie in the film. She's phenomenal in this. I'm a huge fan of Mikey Madison. She's been in a Scream film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I think she's just a very, very talented actress. She does a really great job leading this film, even though I think sometimes the screenplay does let her down a little bit, but I will get into that. I just wish she was given a little more time by herself in the story. I think that's maybe my problem with this. I wish we got a little more isolated Anora/Annie rather than a lot of people around, but we'll get into this. Mark Edelstein as Ivan, our little Russian Timothy Chalamet. I thought he was really good in this. Like, he plays his role, which will reveal kind of the full role in spoilers, of course, but he plays this rich kid, Russian oligarch child very well. I think he plays the kind of coming and seeking out the American dream and party lifestyle super well. They have a very natural chemistry, the two of them. Mikey Madison and Mark Edelstein as Ivan, he's good, she's good. Like, they're both just working really well together in every scene they have together. And I think the cast just does really well in this film. Everyone kind of hits their mark perfectly. I think there's no problem with any of the performances, and I think they're well directed. It's just the script that sometimes I had issues with, but the cast overall, like, really great. Even the supporting players are seriously phenomenal in this. You got Karen Karagulian as Toros. I think he is so hilarious. There's so many huge laughs that come from him. Same with Vasha Tomasian as Garnik. I think they're playing the Armenian gangsters who are protecting Ivan and like work for his family, and they're absolutely hilarious. Yura Borisov as Igor. We'll talk way more about him in spoilers, I think, but he is such a critical player in this film, and I really loved what they did with him, I think, and I only really appreciated it more and more the further I get from that first viewing, and that's why I'm gonna say in this episode a billion times, I need a second viewing. I'm already planning on seeing it probably by the time this episode is out on the Monday. I may have seen it a second time because I really do want to analyze a little bit more and try to work through some of my mental hoops or whatever. I think I just really got caught up in maybe my anticipation of the film, and it wasn't what I expected, but I didn't know how to feel about that, but I still really enjoyed it. There's just really great comedic performances in this. So yeah, let's talk about the story. I thought the story was a really great concept. Like the synopsis says, it's this fun Cinderella story where, you know, Annie is a sex worker. A lot of the opening half hour, I want to say, and it's not a spoiler, it's all in the trailer, we get to kind of see her doing her work and her go home and what her living dynamics are like and how she kind of treats her work and how she feels about it. We see people asking her about it, and that's all in the trailer. Come Oscar time, this is a film that everyone will want to see because I could see it getting a Best Picture win. I think it certainly has the rallying behind it of people really championing this film, and I wouldn't be terribly upset if it did. So that Cinderella story, I think, works just superbly well, and as you see in the trailer, Ivan runs out on her when the guys come to get the marriage annulled. So most of the movie is them trying to track him down. And then our story kind of transforms from that Cinderella story to a fish out of water story where Annie is going around with these guys that work for this rich Russian family, and they're trying to all find him together. And she's very much, it's a very fun fish out of water story where we're seeing her who's very much out of her own environment, and she's trying to stay, you know, shelled, and she's trying to really isolate herself and being like, I'm only in this to find him. I'm not going to talk. I don't want to open up or anything like that. So I really loved kind of the changes in the story that we get. I think this is a very, immediately reading the premise and seeing that first trailer, I was sold on the story. And you know, Annie/Anora is a great anchor for our story to take us through this world that none of us are familiar for sure. Like, this is a movie, when I walked out, I was kind of like, oh, that's like Conclave. Like, you know, I think of Russian oligarchs. I'm a soccer fan, right? And the Russian oligarchs, Roman Abramovich, he owned Chelsea, friend of Vladimir Putin. Of course, there's, you know, tons of kind of, I don't know, outward mysticism about these oligarchs of like the lifestyles they live. This movie kind of just treats the lifestyle as very matter of fact. Like, the kid just has a bunch of his dad's money and he's just spending it all, and it is what it is. So I don't know, it was kind of just fun to see like the day-to-day partying of this kid, and he's just like, yeah, whatever, I'll spend my money. And it's like a very peek behind the curtain to see possibilities, and it's like interesting also Annie's perspective of her work and who she is. I don't think this movie at all has kind of a message about sex work. I think it doesn't have any commentary about sex work, and I do like kind of how matter of fact it is about sex work as well, that it's Annie's job, and it's very clear that people look down on her, and she's absolutely fine with the work. She's fine with doing this, and she gets her money, and she seems like she really has her defenses down. She has her system. If I'm not mistaken, what I kind of read about Sean Baker a little bit, and I think a lot of his films have touched on sex work in the past as well. I think Red Rocket had, or at least not maybe just sex work, but sex in general and kind of transactional sex and stuff like that. So I don't know. I thought maybe it was just a handy avenue to have in the story that she's someone that because of her work, she is the way she is, that she has to be a little bit guarded and stuff like that. So not only are the characters a really great anchor for this film, and I think Annie is the perfect kind of character to ground this all, but the community, I like the involvement of like this Russian oligarch community, but also the Armenian community in this film I find very fascinating. You know, these guys are all heavies for this Russian oligarch. They're part of their church, and there's all of these different settings we're going to within New York that are Russian restaurants, Armenian restaurants, where they're trying to find Ivan. It's just very interesting. I really liked kind of the DNA makeup of this cast. It's a very fun kind of, I don't know, we're kind of getting to know this other community and these immigrants that have moved to America and are now happy to be there, and they've set up, you know, I love immigrant stories. Like, that's just what it is. My mother's an immigrant, and I love seeing culture be spread across the world and people getting to interact with other cultures that aren't their own. That's what I love about traveling. I love just involving yourself in a world that you aren't from. Like, that's the best way to learn and connect with other people. And I think this film does a great job of that, of, I don't know, just kind of showcasing whether it's, you know, the Armenian community that they all enjoy dancing, they enjoy their food, the Russian communities that are living in New York as well. Like, it's all just very interesting. And the city as well, New York, it's great. Like, they go to all these clubs and restaurants as well. New York is just a great place for this. And of course, she's a sex worker, Annie. So sex plays in a very important part in this film. And And there's been so many discussions recently asking, like, is sex necessary on films? There's apparently polls and surveys saying that younger people want less sex in films, but in spoilers, I'm specifically going to address this. And let me just say, I think sex is used in a very smart way in this film, obviously because she's a sex worker, but a lot of the how people use sex or how they have sex as well and how they care for each other really does foreshadow and kind of speak to our characters, how they're feeling. But I'll talk all about that more in spoilers. I just, in a non-spoiler sense, there is, yes, a lot of sex in this film, sure. Specifically in the first half, I would say there's a lot of sex in this film when they're getting to know each other and they're partying. But when you analyze those scenes of intimacy, you kind of can see the root of people's personalities and how they treat someone in such an intimate moment. Whereas for her, yes, it is just work, and that's what it is. But I think there are deeper meanings to that. Comedy-wise, this movie was very funny, and there was a lot of really great laughs in my audience. There's a lot of really great bits. I think Sean Baker at times is balancing the comedy perfectly with that underlying tragedy or tension, I guess, like it is a rom-com, but not a very traditional rom-com. Having said that, this movie's funny, but I don't think it quite ever hit hilarious for me. Like, there were never moments where I was absolutely belly laughing. It was just a lot of like good kind of giggles or a little bit of laughs. And I think sometimes the comedy goes on a little bit too long. This is a 2-hour and 20-minute film. I easily could have seen it being 2 hours, to be honest. And I'm all for long movies. Like, I'm excited for The Brutalist, which is like 3.5 hours and has an intermission. I'm pumped for that. I've never gone to a movie with an intermission. So I'm all for long movies. The Batman's my favorite movie, and I will acknowledge that's a long movie, but I think the runtime is great and it earns it. Sometimes the comedy and certain scenes in this movie are just lasting a little bit too long, and we're kind of just running over the same jokes and just doing the same bits over and over and over again. Like, we'll go do something else, then our characters come back into a room, do the exact same bit, and it's just a little tiring. Like, it's like, okay, I get it. It was funny the first time, but now it's just you're overstaying your welcome. But I think that also speaks to a larger issue I had with this, is that the jokes weren't strong enough or frequent enough to distract me from a script that I felt was a little bit hard to access at times and was kind of hiding its cards too close to its chest. At times, I just wanted kind of the reveal or an honest conversation of how people are feeling, or I don't want them to internalize everything. And that's how I felt at first. Maybe upon reflection, I get it, and I think a second viewing I'll appreciate and I'll pick up on more intricacies. But for me, at times, it was a little bit slow in scenes. We were just kind of running over things, and it's playing things a little bit too close to the chest that it's not revealing anything new when we're going back to do these things. So a little bit hard to access. And I do think the movie could have been a little bit shorter, to be honest. I'm all for going home and sitting and thinking about a movie after you've watched it to understand it. And in fact, I saw this at like 7 p.m. last night, and it's 1 o'clock right now in the afternoon on the Friday. I think the more I sit with it, the more I'm enjoying it, and the more I'm kind of able to digest it, and I'm really picking up on things. And that was only after I wrote notes for the podcast. I really was like, oh, okay, I get it. I get it. It's just that I think the delivery method is a little bit stubborn and unwilling to give sometimes. And it's a little bit, I need a little more flexibility, Sean Baker. I need a little more, just give us the answer here, because it's going to really continue to pull us in. And I think it'll build a little bit more to our big tension points, And like, yeah, thinking about it, I still feel a little bit underwhelmed. And that comes largely from the delivery method. When the story wrapped up, I felt like I didn't really ever get to know Anora. I think the movie's not telling us tons about her. It's instead, you kind of have to put your reflection on how she acts, and the movie's not going to tell you in a very straightforward way how these people are feeling. This is a movie that you really have to dig down, pick up on all the little nuances to truly understand. And I don't know, I was reading a lot of reviews on Letterboxd last night, like trying to kind of sit with my feelings and then like, well, how did other people seeing this? Am I missing something? And it was largely positive. Like I said, rave reviews for this film, but there were a few people as well, and I'm glad that I'm not alone, that felt like the movie's called Anora, but I don't know if we ever truly got to know her. Like, it felt a little bit, like I said, I wanted a little more her in isolation and her by herself, and just able to have her sitting with her feelings. What is she like when people aren't around? Because Anora is very guarded with the outside world, even with her sister. Like, she seems very guarded and defensive and sarcastic, and I love her. I think she's a hilarious character, and I really enjoyed Mikey Madison's performance. I just wish that since we have a talent like her playing Annie, I wish we got a little bit more of just her instead of a lot of the noise around her. And Sean Baker is very good at doing these scenes with a lot of chaos and people yelling at each other and just very funny, chaotic scenes as well. Like, I did find this movie very funny, maybe not hilarious sometimes because it stays a little bit too long in those comedy moments, but I don't know. Is it intentional that we're never supposed to truly know her? Maybe because he wants us to go home and think about it, and nobody ever truly knows Anora because she is so guarded because of her line of work. Maybe that's what it's supposed to be, but I do wish that Sean Baker just kind of let her have the spotlight a little bit more, given the talent of Mikey Madison. Intentional or not, her character felt forgotten about for a large portion of this movie. Like, the more I think about the film, I still think there's large stretches of this movie where I think Annie's left a little bit too much in the background and we're focusing on these goons and these other guys, which if I'm seeing a movie Anora, she's the draw-in point for me. I want to know her and I want that Cinderella story. I want that fish out of water story, not this goon film. And I saw some reviews, specifically one was like, I think this movie would have been better called like Finding Ivan or something like that. And I kind of agree. I don't know. Like, I do think Anora is the key player of this film, but for me, a lot more the film is about finding him and the marriage rather than just her. So yeah, I don't know. I think definitely a second viewing is going to help me clear it up, and I can maybe focus a little bit more on Mikey Madison as she's in the background a lot of these scenes. You know, like by the end, I knew Ivan. I knew clearly who he was, what he's all about, what he stands for, what the life he comes from. But Anora, I felt she's a little bit too hard to read. I think Sean Baker is a very good director. This film is very, very well crafted. Like, the cinematography is gorgeous. I can't remember who did that, but it's just a very gorgeous movie. I love what he does with New York City, what he does with these immigrant communities, and I love what he does. Largely, I love what he does with Anora and her Cinderella story and Fish Out of Water story. I just think he could have been a little more, honestly, like blunt. Like, just tell us exactly, and a little more open-hearted and peel back the curtain just a little bit more. There weren't tons of lines in the film that I walked away from thinking about today. Rather, it was just subtle glances, or he does very real dialogue very well. Like, this is how people would talk in the real world for sure. Nobody is in the real world giving these philosophical quotes, of course, but you know, it's a movie. I want something that's quotable the next day, and there wasn't tons of stuff. And certainly he makes some choices using some slurs in this movie, but like, I don't know, that's just kind of how these characters talk. So I don't know how I feel about that. Like, I guess they're part of the story, but like, I'm indifferent. I don't really care. For me, I feel like that's not my place to comment on that. There's big emotional swings in this movie, like big moments that ultimately, when they came, felt a little bit underwhelming, or maybe just a little, too authentic. Of like, yeah, that's probably how that would go down in real life. Like, people would still be subduing it, and we wouldn't get this big swing, or as big of a swing as I thought. And it did remind me of Past Lives. Past Lives, I kind of wanted those peaks to be a little bit higher, like just to give me a little bit more. And I think that's another movie, Past Lives, that I want to go back and watch because I might have a further appreciation for it the second time. I think there's just, I don't know, intricacies in this film that were a little hard to pick up on at first because I'm kind of overwhelmed by the comedy of the moment, whereas Past Lives didn't have that comedy, obviously. I'm sticking back to Anora. I'm not talking about Past Lives now. It's just there's these big moments that I felt underwhelmed by because we don't get an insight into how people are really feeling. They're not truly speaking their feelings. It's just a lot of actions that you really have to work to analyze to pick up. And honestly, that's kind of fun. I think far too many movies now just tell us exactly what's going on, exactly how people are feeling. And, that can be a little tiring. It's like, give me something to chew on. And I will give Sean Baker big credit for this. He definitely gave me stuff to chew on. Coming home, the whole car ride, I didn't even listen to music. I was just thinking about this movie. This morning, I woke up thinking about the movie, writing my notes, thinking about the movie, just really trying to dig in and get this movie. And I think I get it now. And I'm going to talk about it in spoilers, what I think I get about this. And it's, 2 hours and 20 minutes, and there's tons of stuff bubbling under the surface for 2 hours. And then those last 20 minutes, I think a lot gets revealed. But for me, it felt a little bit too little too late, or there weren't big enough jumps leading up to it. Like, people just yelling in a room isn't a big enough swing for me. I need more big kind of revelations, or I don't know, maybe I think that's just a personal thing for me of what I was expecting from this film. And I think it's a much more authentic approach to how people actually act in real life, where I thought we were going to kind of dip more into the dramatic and the melodrama of it all. But look, overall, it's strange. I think I found my Past Lives of 2024, a movie I've looked forward to for months and I've been hyping up in my head. And coming out of it, maybe it just wasn't what I expected, but I still really enjoyed it. Because since this first trailer, I've been so pumped hearing about it after all the awards and film festivals. I'm like, damn, this might be it. Like, this might be my favorite movie of the year. And I don't think it is. I think it's the movie I've had to think about the most after watching it this year, which I really appreciate. I like art and things that you watch or you read and you just really get to sit and think about it. It makes you reflect on what you watched and you have to really pick up details. And I don't know, maybe I'm just a little bit stupid and I missed a lot of stuff. That could be entirely true. I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, having said all that, I really like this and I want to see it again to make more sense of it. I could definitely see my rating going up on a second viewing when I can kind of get through all the fluff and the, overextended comedy for me and just enjoy our characters' journeys and try to pick up on the intricate things of the script. But for now, 4 out of 5 stars. I would totally suggest Anora. It's a very, very complicated story that I loved a lot. And I don't mean complicated like hard to understand because there's so many characters and references to other things. No, it's just like a complicated journey that they're going through and I really loved it. How, love is complicated, relationships are complicated, and all these dynamics. But I think we should get into spoilers. As Jeff Probst would say, all right. I've gone to the bathroom, refilled my coffee. I'm ready to talk about the nitty-gritty spoilers of Anora. So spoilers, you've been warned. So there's a few scenes for me that, although maybe some of them go on a little bit too long, they were just like brilliant comedy and I loved the home raid and like her being tied up. Lots of comedy packed in there with like the guys just being like, she's nuts. She's actually dangerous. She broke my nose. And the guy using a bag of frozen tortellini or pierogies. I can't remember, but him icing his nose with that was just a hilarious gag. Again, like this movie just has so many comedic things packed into it. I don't think there's anything like truly out of this world hilarious, but there's a lot of funniness to this movie that I really enjoyed. And like upon further reflection, again, my opinion just keeps growing on this film, I think. And I'm just like, I just had to sit with it for a little bit. So I appreciate this podcast giving me the opportunity to kind of talk through my feelings. All these scenes of them going in like different places, like restaurants, clubs, and Toros just holding out his phone being like, have you guys seen this guy? Have you guys seen this guy? Just every place they went to had a great scene. Like they go to the candy shop and Igor just tears it up with the baseball bat when the guy tries to attack him. He just snatches it out of his hand. Just like really funny. And like Toros leaving the baptism all the way to getting to the home raid was such a great 15 minutes. Him just checking his phone at the baptism and being like, oh, sorry, I gotta go. And he just like literally leaves a baptism halfway through, which is really funny. I think him checking his phone and stuff kind of went on too long. That was the only thing that I kind of felt dragging a bit. But he says in the car when he's driving to the house, he has like everyone on the phone just screaming on speakerphone while he's driving. He's like, I'm going to be there in 10 minutes. I'm 10 minutes away. Don't move. And I think that whole sequence actually is 10 minutes. So we have him fully on the phone for 10 minutes, which I appreciated. I wouldn't cut any of that part out. That was brilliant. And the comedy in that scene and the building of tension, the dynamics of everyone, of Toros just yelling on the phone and the guys in there trying to tie her down, and then Ivan just running away and leaving the house was just, that was all really good. Like I loved all of that stuff. And specifically, I just want to highlight the diner scene. I loved Toros berating these younger Armenian guys, I believe, being like, oh, you're young generation. You guys don't want to work. You don't want to be nice. You don't respect your elders. Him just freaking out and berating them in the middle of the restaurant was so funny. While broken nose guy on pills, Igor and Annie are all just eating their food or whatever. And that scene in particular, I think I really loved. That was kind of our first or maybe our second or third like blossoming of the dynamic or the relationship between Annie and Igor, where she's like, oh, I want one of those pills. And he's like, oh, I don't have any more. And she's like, well, go get some. He's like, I can't. They're my grandma's pills. Or she also says, sorry, like, why don't you have any more? He's like, well, I'm not a drug dealer. Like, I got those for him because he's in pain. What I'm trying to say is I think that's the first inkling, other than the scarf moment, where Annie's like, who is this guy? Like, maybe he's not just some meathead working for the Russians, and like me, maybe he isn't just defined by his work. Maybe there's an actual human in there, because the whole film, everyone just looks at Annie as, she gets called hooker. They just kind of label her, oh, that's the prostitute, that's the hooker. And everybody just kind of has this blind definition of her, or everybody thinks they know Annie. And Igor is the only one in the story that sees through all that. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second, but I think the diner scene was really one scene that really stuck out to me. And I think, look, I think that right there is just my appreciation for this film growing. Like, I don't know, this has been a weird review. I think I was just underwhelmed, but I just needed to think on it a bit more. I definitely think my rating is going to go up on a second viewing now that I've thought about it a little bit more, but I don't know. Maybe I'll watch it again and be like, no, I'm still underwhelmed. Like I said, okay, let's talk about sex in the film. So all of the sex in the film really does show Ivan for the inexperienced, kind of fast-paced, uncaring young guy that that he is. He's very rough in sex. He's very quick. Like he just kind of rushes into it versus Annie, who is professional. She's calculated. She tries to give guidance to him of like, why don't you slow down and we can enjoy it more. That right there is their relationship perfectly summarized. She has to guide him and be like, hey, I think you should think about this for a second. Because again, I knew, Ivan, you fully get to know him throughout the movie. He is a young, spoiled little brat whose parents can just pay their way out of everything. I'm sure, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he got married before this and paid for the divorce or whatever and just paid off the girl, because Toros is like, oh yeah, it's a green card wedding, we'll pay you off, give you 10 grand or whatever. Sex is very interestingly used in this film, specifically in the last scene, the revelation of the film, where Igor is dropping off Annie at home. And I'm going to talk specifically about our two final scenes kind of in a second, but just I'll talk about sex specifically in that scene. Is she is kind of used to sex being transactional, specifically with Ivan. She's having sex, he's paying her to be his horny American girlfriend for a week, and she doesn't really see it as a love method. It's just like a body of work, and that's what it is. And we never see her intimate with anyone else in like a loving, caring way. I don't know how often she was having sex with Ivan as a loving, caring thing. Like, I don't think that's part of this story. Versus, how she has sex with Igor speaks to their relationship much more. But like I said in my non-spoilers, there's a lot of bubbling under the surface things. Like this is a film that's just building tension for 2 hours, 20 minutes and slowly reveals itself as it goes on. And that's why I think the more you think about it, the more you're like, oh, that's where that hint was earlier and all that stuff. Like, it's not a very complicated story or whatever, and it's not trying to like hide super intricate Easter eggs. It's just a movie you have to reflect on. So Ivan's lack of clarity at the start really does result in our main problem. Like, they're setting up the way he has sex, the way he talks to people. He's just like always joking around. He's one of those people that you can never just get an honest answer out of. And I've had friends like this in real life where you ask them serious questions and they just can't be serious. Like, they have to give you sarcasm. They have to give you a joke because they're trying to hide their immaturity, or they don't want to live an honest life, or whatever it is. I don't know. Like, it's just a lack of clarity that starts our problem. And I think you can see it very clearly at the start. Like, oh yeah, this kid's immature. He's some rich kid that's in America just blowing all of his money doing drugs and just kind of living this very irresponsible lifestyle that implicates other people like Annie. That comes to fruition with the divorce, and she's like, you're a fucking pussy, and she yells at his parents like, your kid's a fucking pussy as well. Annie makes a very honest effort to enter the family. She speaks Russian to the mother, and she can see, like, I think that was a moment where I was like, oh yeah, this family probably does this a lot, where this kid gets in trouble and the parents have to bail him out. Annie's slow realization that this marriage is a fraud marriage, that was my favorite line in the movie. I think that's a line that stuck out to me. But fraud marriage, he doesn't love her. It's very clear that he's just a reckless kid. She's willing to forgive him even after he goes back to the strip club where she works, gets a private from another girl that works there, and she's willing to forgive all that, running out on her, not telling his parents, which pays off with her willingness to divorce him, fighting back, calling him a pussy. You can see the slow bubbling of her realization and her anger throughout the film of being like, am I getting duped here, or is my Cinderella story actually happening? I think there's a lot of brilliance in Mikey Madison's performance and her just slowly giving us little hints. Man, like right now, just talking through this, I'm appreciating the film so much more, and kind of that underwhelming feeling is going away, and maybe it's more of a feeling of subverted expectations, And finally, her relationship with Igor. The whole time she's put off by this goon, as she calls him, or I can't remember what the word is that she calls him, like I don't want to say it in case it's like a Russian slur or something, but her entire relationship with Igor, he's like, oh, are you okay? Like, I don't want to tie you up or whatever, like untie her. And he's just always very like, oh, what's your name and stuff like that. It just from their very first interaction, you can see he's kind of like very odd and just kind of to himself. He's the only one that sees her as like an actual human being and not just as a sex worker like everyone else is treating her, and as a problem. He gives her a scarf. He's like, here, are you cold? Like, put this on. And she's like, oh, fuck off or whatever. And then 2 seconds later, she's like, hey, give me the scarf. And she's very off by him, and that culminates in that final scene. So let's talk about those final 2 scenes. After the divorce, Ivan goes back to Russia with his family, of course, and they're like, Igor, because Igor lives in New York with his grandma, and that's like a part that he just keeps talking about his grandma and his family and like himself, and Annie is very put off like that, like, why are you telling me about you? But he's just opening up, and there's this very startling moment where they're back at the mansion, and they're like, yeah, you can stay there tonight, but then tomorrow take her home or whatever, because they have to go to the bank and get her 10 grand or whatever in the morning, and she says to him, you assaulted me, and he pushes that off and says, no, I wasn't assaulted. insulting you. I had to hold you down. And also, like, you know, she bit him and stuff, which was really funny. But then she asked, like, why didn't you rape me? Like, you have those rape eyes. I know you wanted to rape me. And he's like, I'm not a rapist. Like, I think that's when she realizes, oh, he didn't judge me, and his job doesn't define his actions. Like, he was literally just here to be muscle. And he also just kind of got looped in on all of this. And I think at the same time, Igor sees her, and everyone else is just generalizing her and painting her with, you know, a single brush and being like, yeah, whatever, she's some cheap hooker. And she takes a lot of offense to that. And you can see she's like, that is not just who I am. That's my job, but that doesn't define me. And I think she is also guilty of that, and something that she realizes later in the film of like, oh, this guy isn't just some mafia dude, some Russian oligarch bodyguard. And she's like, why didn't you rape me? He's like, because I'm not a rapist. All I did was try to support you, or like protect you, or care for you, or something. And I think you can see in her eyes, she's very put off. Like, holy shit, no one's ever just said that to me before. Or at least a man that she's been intimate with has never just said, I'm not in this for transactional sex. I don't need your body. I'm here to take care of you. And I think she's not used to that. It's just a great dynamic that plays out throughout the film. He sees what's going on the whole time. I really love what Sean Baker did of just constantly, every time some big moment is happening, cut to Igor. He's like not looking at anyone else. You can just see he's really thinking about what's going on, and then he's looking at Annie. And anytime there's some big moment, they always interact with each other. He just talks to her, kind of checks in on her, asks how she's feeling. And he's the only one that she really opens up to. Annie, however, is, only seeing Igor as some goon for the whole movie. And when she finally sees that Igor really cared about her and isn't in this for sex, she doesn't know how to treat that. So at the end, he's like just trying to make conversation with her. And I think she wants to say thank you to him, but she's never had to do that before. So she doesn't know what to do. She's used to guys like Ivan who just pay her, she has sex for them. And that's how she, communicates with people, is through her work and her line of work. And I think her line of work is very important to this story because she has such a hard outer shell, and maybe that kind of speaks to the inaccessibility of Anora and the intentional nature of this story, or the intentionality of this story, that Sean Baker doesn't want you to know Anora because nobody ever gets to know her. She's very much walls up. We don't get to know her, but he wants to care for her and comfort her, and she doesn't know how to respond to that at the end. So she immediately resorts to sex with him. She thinks that's what he wants. Oh, he just wants sex from this, but like, he's just looking for an honest conversation, and it's not her fault, and that's not like shaming her at all. It's just that you can see she's very, I think, alone in her life maybe, or she's only just work. That's all she thinks about. So she thinks, oh, this is like what he wants from me. Okay, fine. Like, I'll pay him back for taking care of me. And she's not able to perform in that moment because I think she can feel that that's not what he wants. And he wants to, it's kind of like Pretty Woman where they can never kiss each other because that's not what she does. But he, like, you can see he just wants an intimate kiss. I think he's not really in it for the sexual aspects of it. And it's a very jarring and confusing final scene that I really enjoyed a lot. And I think kind of, some people called it a cop-out of like, whatever, it kind of just like sells out the story. But I don't know, that final scene just struck me, and it's kind of heartbreaking because you can see two people that aren't used to this. Like, I don't think he's used to a lot of people seeing him as more, and maybe she's finally starting to see him as more than a bodyguard, and he's put off by it. Like, he's a guy with feelings who just lives with his grandma. She's a sex worker that lives with her sister and also has feelings, and nobody looks at her that way other than maybe her friend at work with her. But yeah, I don't know, just like, there's so much complexity to the story, so much to think about. The more you think about it, the more you appreciate the movie. I'm definitely going to see this again. Look, overall, it's a great film. It really makes you think, and there's just so much to digest. I gave it 4 out of 5, but it's like just towing the line of maybe going to 4.5. I do think with a second viewing, I'm going to pick up a lot. I still think there's problems with the script of comedy staying too long in it, but comedy is subjective. For some people, it might have just got funnier as it's going on, but certainly it was really cool. I was in a packed screening last night. A lot of young people as well. Like, I think this is a movie a lot of young people are drawn to. Just yesterday, my girlfriend said, oh, that movie Anora, my work, like the magazine I work for, just put out an article about that, about the fashion in that. So I think it's a lot of young people are drawn to this film for the fashion of it, the stars in it, the story it's telling, and it's just very interesting. So overall, this is a movie that I've really had to, and I hope my review speaks to how much I've had to sit and digest after watching. It's not something you come out of immediately getting. So maybe that's part of my underwhelming feeling. I think it's more of a, wow, that wasn't what I was expecting. And I think the more I think about it, the more brilliant it is. And I even put an edit in my Letterboxd review this morning of like, guys, I've thought about it more, and I think I'm starting to like this movie even more. So I think I will see it a second time for sure. For now, it's a 4 out of 5. I would totally recommend Anora, towing the line of 4.5 out of 5. But let's move into what else I watched. Okay, I was away, so I wasn't watching tons of stuff, specifically with the election going on Tuesday. I'll get that out of the way. Yes, I watched the election. I was bummed out by it. Like, I'm Canadian, but I still think if you're someone that says, oh, we're in Canada, it doesn't matter. It does. They border our country, but I think let's kind of escape from the election. Let's start with TV shows. So What We Do in the Shadows, episode 3 and 4, I caught up to where it's currently at. So funny. I'm actually loving season 4. They did the railway episode with Sean, their neighbor, where they set up an entire fake railway and hire actors just to give Sean an interview and hire him, and then the company goes under and the other company like goes to buy it or whatever. And it was so funny. Like, if you haven't watched What We Do in the Shadows, you're definitely missing out, and you have 6 seasons now that you can binge watch on Disney Plus. It's honestly, for me, one of the funniest shows of the last few years. I've loved every season in its own way, and I'm honestly gonna miss it when it ends. Like, I'm kind of bummed it is the last season, but I'm very happy that a lot of my favorite shows are doing this as well, of stopping while it's still good. Don't drag on. For me, Stranger Things, a show I loved the first season, I barely care about season 5, and they just released the first stills this week. I didn't even look at them. I don't care. It's taking 3 years to make a season. I'm losing interest. We got the second last episode of The Penguin, episode 7, called Top Hat. Phenomenal episode, setting up so much tension in that season finale. I'm so curious where they're going with the Batman Part 2 by the end of this series. I'm so excited for Sunday. By the time this is done, this will be out, and I'm thinking next week we are going to do a Penguin episode because I've just enjoyed every minute of it, or I'm going to go see Red 1 in theaters, but we'll see. Also, let's talk Survivor. What an episode this week. Rachel is slowly becoming my favorite player. I said after Asia went home that I think Rachel could maybe win, given how much screen time she's getting. I still sort of stand by that, but let's talk about the last 2 episodes for Rachel. So last week, Saul gives her the safety without power. She leaves, blows up the Tuku tribe or whatever, the blue team, and they have to vote out one of their own. Great episode as well. But this week, she, in the Survivor auction, which I thought went on a little bit too long this week, she got a hidden immunity idol clue, and she has to get it out of the tarp at camp, which was just amazing. She's so just aware of everything going around her. I think she's a very insightful person, and the fact that everyone, or a lot of people in the game rather, are saying Rachel's playing the best game here, I don't know, maybe she's gonna win it. It's reminding me of a little bit of like Erica or Kenzie, where a lot of people are on the island are saying she's playing a good game, but maybe her edit isn't giving her like full spotlight. I think there's a lot of good players this season, but then at Tribal Council, she plays her shot in the dark instead of her idol first to see how did people pick up on that? How did people react when I played my safety without power? Nobody panicked. Everybody just thought, oh, that was random. So she knows, okay, they're not gunning for me. They're going for Sam or Sierra, and Sierra gets absolutely blindsided. I'm loving the reactions to people getting voted out this season. People are pissed instead of like, oh, good game, guys. Good game. Good job, guys. I'm so proud I got to play with you all. I love the pissed off reactions. I want a bitter jury. It's fun. 46 had one of the most bitter and competitive juries, and it was hilarious to watch. TV's been good this week. Of course, I also watched the election literally till 3 a.m. on Tuesday night. Let's talk books, and then we're going to go into movies. Books, I finished Chapter House Dune. I just audiobooked it. I could not stomach Heretics of Dune. I thought it was so bland and different from the other books. So I was like, I just want to finish Chapter House before Dune Prophecy comes on. Maybe I liked it a little bit better than Heretics of Dune, but I still think the last 2 books are so repetitive, but also just feel so different from the other books that they don't feel like Dune. And then I've finally gotten into my graphic novels. Last night I read Batman Year One. I think I might do a review for my social medias of it. I think I've read it 2 or 3 times already, and I've watched the movie version of it, the animated movie, 4 times already. I love it. It's one of my favorite Batman stories, Batman Year One. I love that we don't see the parents get killed. It's just like year one. It's just him learning to be Batman in the first year. Frank Miller's work, so good. Dark Knight Returns as well is awesome. I'm going to start the New 52 Flash run. I think it's like Flash Origins. I can't remember what it's called, but that's what I'm going to read this weekend. Movies, not too much this week, to be honest. Of course, I saw Anora. Saw that last night, but last weekend we watched Olivia Rodrigo Guts World Tour film on Netflix. Of course, we saw the concert in Montreal, and let me just say the concert film is exactly like the same show that we saw in Montreal, which is a little bit of a bummer in these big stadium tours that pretty much every concert is kind of identical and it's more of like a stage play. It was kind of a bummer how much of an identical show it was, other than Chapel Roan coming out for just one song towards the end. Okay, and then the only new movie that I watched other than a documentary concert film was Immaculate with Sydney Sweeney. Pretty decent. I think I gave it 3 or 3.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd. I think the first half I didn't really care what was happening. Then that last hour, it like really picks up, and I think Sydney Sweeney starts to give a good performance. I still think, to me, she's a little bit overrated, and I don't connect with a lot of her performances. I just think maybe it's something in the way her tone is. I don't think she's good at like inflicting emotions, but she has a screaming sequence at the end, no spoilers, where she's doing something and she's screaming for like the last 5 minutes of the film. I thought that part was really good. Really enjoyed that. So Immaculate, if you want to catch up on a Sydney Sweeney film, if you're like a big fan of hers from Euphoria or Anyone But You, check it out. It's still a decent movie. I was entertained by it, but I just think it's like, if you've seen the first Omen, which also came out, I don't know, it kind of just like, you kind of know where it's going. But what am I going to watch this weekend? Well, we watched the John Mulaney SNL last weekend. Of course, I thought that was really great, with Chappell Roan as well. She put out a new song on SNL that was really fun. I thought it was a pretty funny episode. And this weekend is the Bill Burr SNL post-election episode, 4 more years of Trump sketches, which I'm kind of tired of. But my girlfriend and I are going to watch all of the Best Picture winners for the Oscars. So we are starting that tonight, I believe. I'll be talking about the Best Picture winners every week, so you can look forward to that. I don't know, I might see Anora again this weekend, but that's about it. I'm also going to read the Flash book, of course. And I think that's going to do it for episode 43, Anora, a film that underwhelmed. Is that the right word? I don't know. Maybe just subverted expectations. It was something I wasn't expecting, and a lot more I had to think about and digest than I thought, which I appreciate at least. What did you think of Anora? Get in touch with me. As I say every week, please, please, please rate and review the show 5 stars and share it with a friend and from your streaming platforms, wherever you get your good podcasts, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Acast, wherever you get your podcasts. Please give it a 5-star rating and a review. You can actually comment below on Spotify now. You can give it a review right under on Amazon and Apple or Acast. If you're listening on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment down below what you thought of Anora. In general, what do people think? How's it going to do at the awards? Given everything you've seen so far this year, this was my 61st movie of the year. I could see it doing very well at the Oscars. I think it is definitely an Oscar-worthy movie, whatever that award is. I think it's definitely a movie that's going to be nominated a lot. How it does win-wise, I'm not sure. I think a second viewing might cement my position a little bit more. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can email us, watcherofallthings@gmail.com. Instagram and Threads are @watcherofallthings, and the TikTok is watcher.of.all.things. That's all linked down below, as well as Letterboxd. KikiJ70, that's KIKIJ70. That's my personal Letterboxd. Go see where Anora, for now, is ranked in my 2024 list out of 61 movies. Go see where Immaculate ranks. All that good stuff. Follow me back on there. Drop a comment on one of my reviews saying, hey, listen to your podcast. I found you that way. I will absolutely follow you back. Let's connect. Let's make a community. Next week, like I said, The Penguin or Red One. It's probably going to be Red One because that movie looks like a disaster and I want to see the disaster. And then in 2 weeks, Gladiator 2. Very much looking forward to that. But I think that's going to do it for this week. All that good stuff down below that I've just mentioned. Thank you all for the love, support. Look forward to regular social media next week and regular kind of TikToks and videos or whatever. Next week, like I said, The Penguin or Red One. Take care of yourself. Disconnect from social media if you need it. Give yourself a little break. Go get a sweet treat. Go get a Diet Coke or something like that. And I will see you in the next one.